Hey everyone, it's Matt, aka Tech Ranger, and today we're going to be taking a look at Avowed for the Xbox. There's a lot of settings in this game, a lot of which are quality of life things, outside of the obvious like display settings like performance, balanced, and quality. But we're going to look at all that in this video and hopefully show you a thing or two that you may not have known. So if you enjoyed the video, leave a like down below, comment down below if you have any questions or if you're playing Avowed. And with all that, let's take a look at some of these settings, show some examples, and see what y'all should be looking at. No pun intended. So the first place we need to look at is the display settings in the game. It's the first thing you're going to see when you open your settings, and you have your FOV. The default FOV is 90, which is pretty good, but you can actually go to the extreme, which is 105 in this game. The maximum might not be everybody's cup of tea because it gives you more of a fishbowl effect. You can see more, but the lower you go, the flatter that image is going to be, and it's going to look zoomed in, and even worse so when it's like 60 FOV, which I wouldn't recommend. I like to leave it at 90 in games that I can in first person perspective, so I just bumped it up a little bit just to give me a little bit more field of view. The next option might be the most important. That's your rendering mode. That's going to determine whether you're playing at 60 FPS, 40, or 30. I'm recording this on an Xbox Series X, so I have three options. The Series S has two options. It's just balanced and quality. Performance is obviously going to give you up to 60 FPS and just a lower resolution, but there's a couple other things going on here. The image is nicer here in quality, but look at the water. You actually see reflections, whereas in the performance mode, you're just seeing kind of a static reflection. However, when you push the engine too much, that means that something's got to give. So you have to dial it back for performance mode to get up to 60 FPS. You're just going to miss out on some of those features that the engine can actually provide. Draw distance is something else you'll notice as well. There's Adra in the distance, that big old crystal with purple around it. You can see it in the bottom clip. With performance mode, you'll need to get closer in order for that to pop up. For me, this really only becomes apparent in the big wide open areas. I'm thinking the majority of people probably won't really notice that much of a difference and they just want to play the game at a good refresh rate, but I do love having some options. If you have a 120Hz display, you can play at 40 FPS with the balanced mode, and actually those reflections are included in the balanced mode. So you're playing at 1440p and you get those nice lumen reflections. Series S should also have this mode, however you're not going to see the reflections on that console. With the balanced mode, you'll still see it in quality. There's actually a really good Digital Foundry video, which I'll link above, which goes into detail if you want to see it. If you're playing on a display that's 120Hz and has variable refresh rate, you can turn this option on to kind of smooth everything out a little bit more. Your mileage can always vary with this, but I kept it on, and so far my experience has been pretty good. But you might see some frame tearing, especially in places like the large cities. To round this section out, let's take a look at gamma. This is going to determine how dark things can get, but when things get darker, the colors can actually pop out a little bit more. This is the default, not bad, not great. Depending on your display though, you might want to go a little darker, just maybe not this dark. The lower you go, the more you'll crush those black levels and you're not going to be able to see in a cave or in a dark room. I would probably recommend staying within like 2 and 220. That way you can find a happy medium depending on your display and how bright or dark it is. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to see these in game rather than just looking at an icon in the menu. There's a lot of variation between displays these days, so hopefully that helps you narrow it down. But now let's jump over to some important game and combat settings. Outside of difficulty in your game settings, first thing you should look at is your autosave frequency. From the Skyrim days, you know that having a little too many autosaves is not great for your game overall and the performance. I don't think that would be an issue for Avowed and Unreal Engine 5, but I do have mine at 10 minutes apiece just so I have a little bit of space in between those saves. Auto-tracking quests is another quality of life feature that is pretty nice to have. I think on a new quest might be a little bit too much just because you're going to be picking up a lot of quests. On quest complete will make it so that only when you complete a quest that the next important one will be selected. Third person is in this game and there is a toggle for it in the game settings. However, you can just do that in the game. So you can just hold the right stick down and it will pop back to third person. It's just pulling the camera back, so not really something you need to mess with in the menu. Head bombing is another thing though. Any type of camera movement, I'm not the biggest fan of. I have head bobbing off because eventually you're going to run across terrain that's not even. Your camera's going to move that much more. So that and camera shake I either like to have off or just at a minimum. The next one here that I think you should take a look at is the camera sway strength. I didn't really know what that meant per the description. I had to actually test it out and see what it did. Basically, from what I can gather, it's when you're moving around, how much that camera moves with your character. So if you turn it all the way down to 0%, that means that you're going to get a little jankiness when you're actually walking around. When you have it at 100%, it's going to be a little bit more fluid. A couple of things in the combat section, the auto activate companion abilities. I'd recommend having this on, or at least to start, because one of the things when you're playing the game is that you can actually direct your companions to use these abilities. However, this actually fills up a slot which you can't use for your own abilities. So having this option on keeps you from having to open up your weapon wheel essentially and actually assign abilities to what you're looking at. The only thing this doesn't really work for is if you encounter something in the environment, like there's an ability that your companion has, like Kai with his fire, you're going to have to actually select that when looking at it. He's not going to automatically clear it for you. This one might be more of a personal preference, but incoming attack warnings is something that is kind of easy mode for me, so I would just turn that off. It'll show yellow arrows above the attacking enemy showing you that they're about to attack you. And I don't think a flash every time you hit something is super necessary, but it is a cool effect. And it might even help in some dark areas. These next few are also personal preference and is more of an aim assist thing. So if you have aim assist on, when you're actually tracking targets, it'll snap to that target. So attacks move towards target, that's going to kind of push you more towards what the aim assist is doing. Magnetism is going to increase that aim assist. Since this game has both melee and ranged attacks, you might want to mess with this setting a little bit to find a sweet spot. The aligning to your target when you're using the aim assist also applies for both block and dodge if you want it to. There's a lot of overlap between these two, the UI and accessibility options, so we're combining those into one section. First thing you're going to see here is the UI text, and that just determines how big the text is in the menus. I like that this is here, so I set mine to large just because, eyes. Below that, you have your conversation things. So auto continue conversation means that you don't have to press a button in order for the conversation to progress or select an option. In other words, like it is in pretty much every RPG, you want to have this option on. I also have the show responses immediately option on, so whenever the conversation is progressing, once there is an option for you to actually select something, you can think about it while they're talking. Just don't select something until they're done talking, because that would actually stop what they were going to say. The next two options here are loot shimmer and interaction. I just keep these on because it's just easier to actually see things that you can pick up in the environment. Next, you want to look at the HUD, and you can turn a lot of these on or off depending on your preference. I would recommend changing this quest tracker option to show on update, because if it's always visible, that means your quest thing is always going to be there when you're playing the game. Unless you're just really not aware of what you're doing, I don't think it's necessary to have it on screen all the time. Notification duration is also a good one to change. I have it on long. That means things will stay on screen long enough to where I won't miss them. In the compass area, one thing that was turned off was these gold shrine totem pieces. Finding these pieces are an important part of making your character stronger in the game, so you should leave this on. And last but not least, let's take a look at the controller settings quickly, and I'll show you what I'm running and why. I tend to not really like vibration in first-person games, not that it's going to mess up my aim necessarily, but up to you if you want to use it. I changed my look sensitivity a little bit. I also changed the inner dead zones for the left and right stick, just because I have a little bit of stick drift. If you have a dead zone here that's too high, the controls will feel rigid. If it's too low, it's going to be very loose, and you're going to be drifting everywhere. I increased the outer dead zone a little bit because when I was turning, I was like spinning around too fast. You can fine tune this a little bit more with look acceleration. That's actually more of a refinement to that outer dead zone setting. And to round out this section, you can remap pretty much any button. And that is going to do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. That was a lot, but I didn't realize how many settings I actually ended up changing, but I did want to include everything that I looked at. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.